Hey guys, welcome back to the next episode of my Trench Crusade painting series. And this time I'm going to be painting up the Devoted Knight from the Trench Pilgrims multi-part kit. And I'm going to be using my Grimdark speed painting technique once again for this model. And the first part of this process involves adding a little bit of extra texture to the model, using some AK Muddy Ground texture paste, and I'm going to be applying this to some of the armour panels, to certain areas where I'm going to be applying some rust effects later on in the process. And I'm also going to be applying a little bit of this to the blade of the swords as well, as I'm going to be applying some blood and gore effects, and this should help build up that texture in those areas as well. And I also decided to apply it to all of the bottom parts of the cloak, which should just give these areas an extra muddy look. And once that dries, I then primed the model in black, before then going in with some Army Painter Company Grey. And I'm going to be using this to apply a very heavy dry brush over the entire model, which is going to provide the base for the upcoming speed paints. And this part of the process probably takes the longest, but it's worth taking the time to hit every part of the model, making sure that you only leave the very deepest of recesses in the black primer, and making sure you have a nice smooth opaque coat over all of the raised and highlight areas. And by making sure you do this, you're going to give yourself a really nice base for applying all of the translucent speed paints in the next step. And once that was done, off camera, I blacked out all of the areas that are going to be metallic, before going in with my first contrast paint, which is Camouflage Green. And I'm just going to use this to paint in his tunic. And I've really been enjoying using contrast paints for my Grimdark painting videos. They're really easy to use and achieve exactly what I'm looking for in one step, which is to base coat all of these areas and provide some basic volumetric highlights. And it just means you're spending a lot less time base coating and layering up highlights. I then used Battle Dress Brown to paint in all of the cloak. And for the rest of the smaller parts, I used willow bark for all of the leathers. And khaki drill for all of the ropes. Both of which are also Vallejo Express colours. And when it came to all of the skin, I decided to go for a combination of Pro Acryl Dark Warm Flesh, with a coat of Reichland Flesh Shade applied once that was dried. And you could always use a flesh shaded contrast paint for this. I just prefer this recipe for this type of model. And for the metallics I used some Army Painter Heavy Metal and Emperor's Gold, dry brushing the heavy metal onto all of the armour panels and the blades of the swords. just leaving some of the black still left in the recesses, and then coming in with the Emperor's Gold, and just using this to paint in all of the crosses and trinkets that are spread across the model. Now that everything had been base coated, I applied a coat of satin varnish to the entire model, before then coming in with the enamel washes. And I'm going to be using my 2-to-1 mix of Villainy Inks Goon's Grime and Ichor of the Damned, which creates a really nice dark brown enamel wash. And I'm going to be thinning it down 1-to-1 with some white spirits, and just applying it over the entire model. And I then left that for around 20 to 30 minutes to dry to the touch, before coming in with some makeup sponges lightly dampened with some white spirits, and using this to remove some of the enamel wash from all of the upward facing surfaces, which helps to bring back some of the highlights in these areas. And once that had dried, I then applied a coat of matte varnish to the entire model. And while I was waiting for the enamels to dry, I painted up the base for the model, just using the exact same technique by dry brushing the entire base in a off-white colour, and then painting in all the details with some contrast paint, and then applying the same enamel wash to the base as well. I then come in with some Dirty Down Rust, and use this to create a rust effect on all of the metallics, just using it straight out of the bottle and dabbing it on to all of the areas that I want to be rusty, and then just feathering out any of the hard edges before the rust effect dries. And I then just come back in with the same Army Painter Heavy Metal and give all of the rusted metallics a quick dry brush, which will just help bring back that metallic look to these rusty areas. And the final step in the process is to apply some blood effects across the model, and in my case I use some Army Painter True Blood. Firstly, just stippling this on to the textured areas on the swords, and then coming in with a toothbrush and spraying the blood effect across the model and the base as well. And that's the model now complete. It's a really nice and simple process, and I really enjoyed using the contrast paints to quickly build up the base layers, before then applying the Grimdark enamels and effects. And a big thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon. As always, your support is really appreciated. And I hope you enjoyed and found this video useful. And if you did, don't forget to give the video a like, and I'll see you in the next one.